Captain Elias Kane had seen plenty of debris fields in his years running cargo along the Coalition's edge, but the mangled escape pod tumbling through the void made him pause. His freighter's sensors were half dead, the life support questionable, and he had exactly 3 days to deliver his cargo or lose his contract. He should have kept flying, but something about the pod's erratic spin, the way its emergency beacon pulsed weakly like a dying heartbeat, made him cut engines and deploy the retrieval arm. The hatch cracked open with a hiss of incompatible atmosphere, and Elias got his first look at her. She was curled in the pod's corner, trembling violently, her skin a deep, rich purple that seemed to shimmer in the harsh utility lights. Blonde hair, matted and tangled, fell across her face in stark contrast to her alien features. When she lifted her head, violet eyes locked onto his with desperate hope. She tried to speak, her voice a melodic whisper in broken universal. "I'm cold, human. Will you be my blanket?" Elias didn't hesitate. He stripped off his worn pilot's jacket and wrapped it around her shaking shoulders, then scooped her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her body temperature shockingly cool against his chest. As he carried her through the narrow corridors to his quarters, his ship's computer chirped a warning. Facial recognition complete. Lyra of Vair. Wanted by Coalition Command. Bounty, 500,000 credits. Enough to buy a new ship, pay off his debts, and retire to some quiet moon somewhere. He laid her on his bunk, the only bed on the ship, and she immediately curled into herself, still shivering. Without thinking too hard about what he was doing, Elias climbed in beside her, pulling the thin thermal blanket over them both. Her cool skin pressed against his, seeking warmth, and he wrapped his arms around her trembling form. In the darkness, he noticed something strange. Faint lines beneath her purple skin, like veins but glowing with soft bioluminescence. They pulsed gently, responding to his touch, his warmth. She sighed against his chest, her breathing gradually slowing to match his. Elias stared at the ceiling, feeling her body slowly warm in his embrace, and knew he'd just made the most dangerous decision of his life. But as she nestled closer, her blonde hair tickling his chin, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. 3 days became a week. Elias told himself he was just waiting for her to recover enough to handle the cold sleep pod in storage, but that was a lie and he knew it. Every morning he woke with Lyra curled against him, her deep purple skin warm now, her luminescent veins glowing brighter than the night before. Her universal improved rapidly, transforming from broken phrases to full sentences with that melodic accent that made his chest tighten. The nights became a ritual, neither acknowledged but both needed. As soon as the ship's lights dimmed for sleep cycle, Lyra would slip into his bunk without a word, pressing her back against his chest. He'd wrap his arms around her waist, and she'd intertwine her fingers with his, guiding his hand to rest over her heart. Through the thin fabric of the spare clothes he'd found for her, he could feel the steady rhythm, slightly slower than human but perfectly synchronized with the pulsing light beneath her skin. Her blonde hair would spill across the pillow they shared, and in the darkness, she'd whisper stories about Veer, the hive cities of crystalline spires, the singing forests that glowed at night, the family she'd lost when the Coalition bombed her world into silence. One night, Elias traced the luminescent patterns on her arm, watching them flare brighter under his fingertips. "Why do you glow like this?" he asked softly. Lyra turned in his arms to face him, their noses nearly touching in the small bunk. Her violet eyes caught the light from her own skin, making them seem to shine from within. "My people glow brightest when we trust completely," she whispered. "When we feel safe. When we single quotes double quotes." She paused, searching for the word home. Her hand came up to rest against his cheek, and the patterns on her palm illuminated his face. "You make me glow, Elias Kane." The proximity alert shattered the moment. Elias was out of the bunk instantly, pulling on his shirt as he rushed to the cockpit. A Coalition scout ship passing within sensor range. His heart hammered as he killed all unnecessary systems, praying they'd stay dark enough to avoid detection. Lyra appeared in the doorway, wrapped in his jacket, her glow dimmed to almost nothing. She was afraid he could see it in the way she hugged herself and how her luminescence retreated like a frightened animal. The scout passed. They were safe. But when Elias turned, Lyra was crying silently, and he realized with stunning clarity that he couldn't imagine giving her up. Not for 500,000 credits. Not for anything. The Coalition hunters found them 4 days later. 3 ships, military grade, closing fast. Elias was already plotting jump coordinates when Lyra's hand closed over his on the controls. "Wait," she said, her voice tight with something that sounded like guilt. "There's something you need to know about my people. About what's happened between us." Her violet eyes met his, and in the glow of the cockpit displays, her purple skin seemed to shimmer with emotion. "They are a physiology? We're not meant to survive in warm atmospheres. When we're exposed to heat for too long, our bodies adapt, but not alone. We bond with the heat source. With a warm one." She squeezed his hand tighter. "My body has chosen you, Elias. The bonding has already begun. If we separate now, if I'm taken from you, we both die. Your temperature will drop, mine will rise, and neither of us will survive it." Elias stared at her, his mind racing. He should have felt trapped, angry, manipulated. Instead, he felt only a strange sense of rightness, as if some part of him had already known. "How long?" he asked quietly. She looked down. "Since the 3rd night. I felt it starting, but I didn't want to frighten you. I thought maybe if I left before it completed." He kissed her. Cut off her words with his lips pressed to hers, her cool mouth warming against his. Her sharp intake of breath, her hands clutching his shirt. The way her entire body suddenly blazed with light brighter than he'd ever seen. Illuminating the cockpit like a star had ignited inside the ship. When they broke apart. Both breathing hard, Elias pulled her into his lap, cradling her against his chest as alarms blared around them. "Then we run," he said simply. "We run and we don't stop." Lyra's luminescence pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, and when she kissed him again, it was with desperate gratitude and something deeper, something that felt like hope. They made love there in the captain's chair, her legs wrapped around his waist, her blonde hair falling like a curtain around their faces as she moved above him. Every touch made her glow brighter, until the ship's interior looked like the inside of a nebula, purple, blue, and silver light dancing across every surface. When they finished, collapsed together in the chair, Elias noticed faint bioluminescent traces on his own skin where she'd touched him. The bond was real, visible, permanent. He set course for the outer rim, away from Coalition space, away from everything he'd known. Behind them, the hunters gave chase. Ahead was only uncertainty. But as Lyra nestled against him, still glowing softly, he knew he'd already made his choice. 3 Coalition hunter ships materialized from hyperspace directly ahead, cutting off their escape vector. Elias swore viciously, his hands flying across the controls as he threw the freighter into a hard roll. Lyra stumbled but caught herself. On his chair, her face pale beneath her deep purple skin. "They found us," she whispered, and her luminescence flickered like a candle in the wind. "Strap in," Elias ordered. But Lyra shook her head. "I can't. I'm too weak. The bond. If I'm more than a few meters from you, I start to freeze." She climbed into his lap instead, her back pressed to his chest, her hands gripping the armrests beside his. It wasn't ideal for flying, but Elias wrapped one arm around her waist and worked the controls with his other hand. Her violet eyes scanned the tactical display, calling out positions and vectors with surprising accuracy. They moved together, breathing together, her body anticipating his movements before he made them. Weapons fire lit up the void around them. The freighter shuddered under impacts, shields flaring and dying. Elias dove toward a nearby asteroid field, the kind of debris maze that would tear apart the bigger hunter ships. But Lyra's bioluminescence was a problem. She was glowing too brightly in her fear, turning the cockpit into a beacon. "They can see us," she gasped, understanding. "I'm sorry, I can't." Elias tightened his arm around her, pulling her closer. "Then don't. Just hold on to me." She pressed herself against him completely, her cheek against his neck, her arms wrapping around his shoulders. She drew warmth from him, comfort from his presence, and her glow gradually dimmed to a faint shimmer. They flew through the asteroid field blind, relying on sensors and instinct, Lyra calling warnings while Elias dodged and weaved. One hunter clipped an asteroid and exploded in a brilliant flash. The other two fell back, unwilling to risk the debris. They emerged on the far side, but victory was short-lived. The chase had pushed the ship's systems to their limits. Life support stuttered, then failed. Temperature in the cockpit began dropping rapidly. Elias felt it first on his skin, then saw Lyra start to shiver again, her lips taking on a bluish tint against her purple skin. "Emergency blankets," he muttered, carrying her back to his quarters. "We'll wait it out until I can patch life support." They huddled together in the bunk, wrapped in every thermal blanket Elias could find, their breath forming clouds in the freezing air. Lyra was fading, her glow nearly extinguished, her body going dangerously cold. Elias held her tighter, willing. Every bit of warmth from his body into hers, sharing breath when hers became too shallow. "Stay with me," he whispered against her blonde hair. "I'm your blanket, remember? I've got you." Lyra's weak laugh turned into a sob. "You were my blanket when I had nothing, when I was lost and dying and alone. You're still my blanket now." Her hand found his in the darkness, fingers interlacing weakly. "Don't let go." Elias woke to warmth and the smell of ozone. Life support had kicked back online, and Lyra was glowing softly in his arms, her deep purple skin warm again, her breathing steady. He'd managed to patch the critical systems while she slept, working in shifts between holding her and keeping them both alive. They drifted in the void for 2 days, off all sensors, presumed destroyed. The hunters had moved on, but they couldn't stay adrift forever. Food was running low, fuel was critical, and Elias knew the coalition would keep hunting. They needed a plan, a destination, somewhere beyond the reach of bounty hunters and military tribunals. He pulled up the star charts on his handheld, careful not to disturb Lyra. The Outer Rim territories, lawless and wild. Sanctuary stations that didn't ask questions. A few independent colonies that might. Elias. Lyra's voice was quiet, still rough from their ordeal. She shifted in his arms, turning to face him in the narrow bunk. Her violet eyes searched his face, and her hand came up to trace the faint bioluminescent marks still visible on his skin, her touch permanently etched into him. "I need you to understand what you've done, what you've given up for me. Your freedom, your future, everything you had." He stopped her with a kiss, gentle and lingering. When he pulled back, he smiled. "I gave up a life running cargo for people I didn't care about, sleeping alone in a dying ship, pretending I wasn't just waiting for something to give me a reason to keep going." His thumb brushed across her cheek. "You think you took something from me? Lyra, you saved me just as much as I saved you." Her eyes filled with tears that caught the light of her own bioluminescence. "Where do we go?" she whispered. Elias pulled up the star chart, showing her a small colony on the edge of known space. "Here, it's called Haven. No coalition presence, No extradition treaties, and the locals trade in skills, not questions. We can disappear there, start over. He hesitated, then added softly, together. Lyra studied the chart, then looked back at him with an expression that made his chest ache. Together, she agreed. She nestled against him, her blonde hair spilling across his shoulder, her body warming his in the way that had become as necessary as breathing. Will it be cold there? She asked with a hint of playful mischief he'd never heard before. Elias laughed, the sound surprising him. Probably. It's a frontier colony. Nothing fancy. Lyra's glow brightened, pulsing in that rhythm that matched his heartbeat. Good, she said. Then I'll still need my blanket. As the freighter's engines hummed to life and Elias plotted the jump to haven, Lyra remained curled against him, her luminescence filling the cockpit with soft, steady light. The Coalition might still be hunting. The galaxy might consider them fugitives. But here, in this moment, with her warmth seeping into his bones and his warmth keeping her alive, Elias Kane had never felt more free. The coldest place in the universe wasn't deep space, it was the life he'd been living before, empty and purposeless. And he would never go back to that cold again. Not when he had her light to guide him home.